You are listening to KiCKFLiP Radio.
So I want you to imagine something for a second. You're scrolling on your phone, and you stop on this breathtaking piece of digital painting. And I mean, it has texture, the lighting is perfect, and it just has this emotional depth that immediately grabs you. You feel this visceral, genuine connection to it.
Yeah, a real aesthetic response.
Exactly. But then you glance down at the caption and you see 3 words, generated with AI.
Ah, yes. The reveal.
Right, and think about what happens in your brain in that exact fraction of a second. The connection just severs.
Completely snaps.
You feel tricked, you know? This piece of work, which like a millisecond ago held immense emotional value for you, is instantly reduced to just worthless noise.
It's fascinating because that immediate psychological whiplash represents a total inversion of value, but without any physical change to the object itself.
The image hasn't changed at all.
Exactly. The pixels are mathematically identical to what they were a moment ago, but our contextual understanding of how those pixels were arranged, well, it fundamentally alters our capacity to appreciate them.
It's like we use the phrase, that's AI generated as a weapon.
Oh, entirely. It operates as a kill switch for empathy.
A kill switch for empathy. That is such a good way to put it. And that's exactly why you and I are here today. Today, we are exploring the precise psychological and really the sociological triggers behind that exact whiplash.
Right, getting into the why of it all.
Yeah. We're unpacking a fascinating report by KiCKFLiP Numbers. It's titled Rescuing Imagination, AI-Assisted Creativity and the Historical Pattern of Human Expression, which came out on May 24th, 2026.
A really profound piece of writing.
It really is. The text examines why we react with such intense hostility. Like, are we witnessing a genuinely new existential threat, or are we just living through the latest iteration of a very old pattern of technological resistance?
And, to set the parameters for this deep dive, I think we need to be really clear about our analytical lens right from the start.
Yeah, let's lay the ground rules.
We are not approaching this from some position of, corporate utopianism.
Right, no tech bro cheerleading here.
Exactly. The goal is not to argue that artificial intelligence is this flawless engine of progress that will just seamlessly democratize art without any collateral damage.
Because that narrative is just intellectually dishonest.
It's completely dishonest. Instead, our objective today is to look at the friction this technology causes and map it onto the broader historical record of human expression.
And the friction really is the perfect starting point. The report introduces this concept of killing the messenger before hearing the message.
Right.
It suggests our society is incredibly quick to invalidate the art itself based purely on its supply chain rather than, evaluating its emotional impact.
Which is a very specific type of cultural gatekeeping.
It is. But I think anyone listening to this can understand that instinct.
Oh, of course.
It's like refusing to read a beautifully written, printed book because it wasn't hand-copied by a monk in a monastery. There's this deep-seated belief that if a machine can somehow bypass the physical struggle of creation, then the resulting work must be inherently hollow.
Yeah, and what you were describing there is actually the behavioral economics of something called the labor illusion.
The labor illusion. Break that down for us.
So, as a culture, we operate under this implicit heuristic, right? Time plus suffering equals value.
Wow, okay. Time and suffering equal value.
Yes. And when the ground rules of what constitutes effort suddenly change, society panics.
Because the math doesn't add up anymore.
Exactly. When a tool dramatically compresses the time required to execute a highly complex task, we experience this collective cultural vertigo.
We get dizzy.
We really do. The anxiety surrounding authenticity isn't actually about the art itself. It is an anxiety about changing economic and social metrics for what we consider legitimate labor.
Okay, that makes sense philosophically. The labor illusion might just be a psychological quirk, but labor displacement is a tangible, terrifying economic crisis.
It is. And the report specifically validates those threats. The anxiety people are feeling is not a phantom, it's real.
Right, we are currently watching the mass production of low-effort synthetic media designed explicitly to just game algorithmic platforms.
Just flooding networks with absolute noise.
Yes, the internet is getting choked with it.
Yeah.
And we're navigating the weaponization of generated media for misinformation, which is incredibly dangerous.
Deep fakes, political manipulation, all of it.
And crucially, we're looking at severe labor displacement.
Which is the most immediate human cost.
Exactly. When we look at commercial illustration or copywriting or stock photography, The sudden devaluation of hard-earned specialized expertise, I mean, it's a profound shock to those industries.
It's devastating.
Let's focus on that labor aspect for just a moment. Say you are an illustrator, right? You spent 20 years mastering the physics of light, human anatomy, color theory.
Decades of intense, focused practice.
Yeah. Your skill is directly tied to your physical discipline. So when a statistical model can certainly navigate a massive data set and output a facsimile of that specialized knowledge in 4 seconds.
The threat is no longer abstract.
No, it is a direct assault on the economic value of your life's dedication.
Absolutely.
And on top of that, there is this massive, unresolved ethical friction regarding how these models were trained in the first place. Scraping millions of copyrighted works without explicit consent.
Right, the data sourcing issue. The socioeconomic disruption is severe, and you're right, the legal frameworks regarding that data sourcing remain entirely murky.
It's the Wild West right now.
It really is. But, and this is a key point in the report, because these fears are so intense and so valid, they are forcing our public discourse to collapse into these really simplistic, unhelpful binaries. Like, we categorize everything as human versus machine, or authentic versus synthetic, real versus fake.
Okay, I understand the danger of binary thinking. It flattens the nuance.
Exactly.
But I want to challenge the idea that these binaries are entirely unhelpful.
Okay, go ahead.
Because let's look at the actual mechanics of creation. If a human is painting a canvas, they bring decades of grief, joy, mortality, their entire lived experience to every single brushstroke.
Right, the human context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And AI has zero lived experience. It doesn't know grief. It is literally just a mathematical model mapping probabilities.
Statistically predicting the next pixel.
Exactly. So when I look at an AI-generated image, I know I'm looking at a statistical prediction of what beauty looks like rather than a genuine human expression of beauty.
I see where you're going.
Right. Doesn't that fundamentally break the unspoken contract between the creator and the audience?
See, that argument assumes the AI is the entity that's actually attempting to communicate.
Well, isn't it?
No, it isn't. The AI is the medium. If a human uses a statistical model to synthesize an image because they possess, say, profound grief, but they lack the physical motor skills or the technical training to actually paint it,
Right.
the grief driving that interaction is still completely real.
The human is feeling it.
Exactly. The human is utilizing a highly complex mathematical space to approximate their own internal state.
Wow. So it's a translation tool.
Precisely. The question isn't whether the machine has lived experience. The question is whether the human, using the machine, successfully translated their lived experience into that final output.
But wait, the human isn't executing the physical details? They are literally just typing a sentence.
Right, the physical labor is abstracted.
Yeah, so how do we reconcile the sheer lack of physical effort? Because, going back to what we said earlier, we intuitively conflate physical labor with emotional value.
We do.
If a piece of art took a long time to make, we just assume it must be more profound.
We assume that, yes. But the metric of physical duration is historically very flawed.
How so?
Consider literature. A truly devastating, life-changing poem might emerge in a flash of inspiration, right?
Sure.
It could be committed to paper in, say, 3 minutes.
Yeah, a sudden burst of genius.
But then think of a deeply uninspired, tedious novel that takes an author 10 solid years to write.
Oh, I've read a few of those.
We all have. Now, does the 10-year duration of physical labor make that boring novel more emotionally authentic than the 3-minute poem?
Well, obviously not. The poem resonates, the novel doesn't.
Right. So if we are being honest with ourselves, we already acknowledge that the duration of labor is not a reliable metric for the quality of meaning.
That's a really fair point.
Yet, because the execution of AI-assisted work is so rapid, 3 seconds to generate an image, we reflexively recoil.
We demand this struggle.
Exactly. We demand the aesthetic of struggle. But this reliance on struggle relies on a historical fiction.
A historical fiction.
Yes. It requires us to believe in the myth of the unaided creator.
Ah, the idea of the isolated genius.
Exactly. The belief that true art is just pulled purely from the ether by a singular mind, completely untouched by external machinery.
Like they're just sitting on a mountaintop creating masterpieces from nothing.
It is a romantic fantasy, and it completely ignores the reality of how humans actually produce things.
Because creativity has always been technologically scaffolded.
Always. Human imagination is fundamentally abstract, right? It exists as neurological impulses in our brains.
Just firing neurons.
Right. So to manifest those ideas in the physical world, the imagination requires a vehicle, a tool.
Like a word processor.
Or a printing press, or even something as simple as metal paint tube. These are all forms of technological assistance.
Wait, let's actually dig into the paint tube because the report uses that exact example to illustrate how deeply technology dictates aesthetics.
It's one of my favorite historical examples.
Right, because before the 1840s, painters couldn't just buy a tube of blue paint.
No, they had to grind their own pigments in a studio.
Using like incredibly toxic chemicals, right?
Yes, and binding them with oil by hand.
Yeah.
Because the paint dried so quickly and it was just incredibly difficult to transport, painting was largely an indoor activity.
It was a highly controlled, very slow process.
Exactly. It tied the artist to the studio.
But then the collapsible tin paint tube was invented, right? In 1841, I think?
Yes, 1841, and suddenly paint became portable. It became stable.
Which seems like such a mundane technological shift. It's just a tin tube.
But that simple shift allowed artists to leave the studio. They could finally go outside and paint rapidly changing natural light in real time.
Wow. So without the invention of the tin tube, the entire Impressionist movement, like Monet, Renoir, Pissarro,
would not exist.
That's wild. The technology fundamentally altered the boundaries of human expression. It changed what was possible to imagine.
And what about musical instruments? Because we treat something like an acoustic piano as a natural purveyor of classical highbrow art.
But if you actually look at a piano mechanically, it is a highly complex piece of automation.
It's an elaborate machine.
It's a machine made of thousands of moving parts. Levers, hammers, dampers, heavy metal strings.
All designed to standardize and automate the production of very specific frequencies.
Right. The pianist presses a button, essentially, and the machine executes the physical striking of the string.
And when the piano was first widely adopted, it was considered a marvel of engineering, precisely because it removed the musician's hands from the strings.
Unlike a lute or a harp, where you have to pluck it yourself.
Exactly. It abstracted the physical labor of making the sound. Yet today, we do not view a pianist as a fraud for utilizing a lever system to strike a chord.
No, we call them maestros.
Right, because we recognize that the piano is just a complex interface for human intent.
Okay, so if the entire history of human expression is really just a history of us building increasingly complex interfaces to get ideas out of our heads, why is the reaction to new tools always so defensive?
Because new tools redistribute access. Whenever a new technology dramatically lowers the barrier to entry for a specific medium, the economic and cultural gatekeepers, the people who have spent their lives mastering the friction of the old tools, they feel deeply threatened.
Threatened by the influx of all these newly empowered creators.
Exactly. And the report takes us through a series of historical case studies that map so perfectly onto the current AI discourse, it's actually uncanny.
The parallels are striking, especially regarding photography in the mid-19th century.
Oh, the backlash against the camera was massive.
When the camera first gained prominence, the established art world didn't just critique it. They reacted with absolute visceral hostility.
They thought it was the end of art.
Literally.
Yeah.
We see prominent cultural figures publicly declaring that painting was dead.
And again, the economic context is vital here to understand the panic.
Right, because of portrait painters.
Yes. In the 1830s and 40s, there was this massive, sprawling industry of miniature portrait painters.
It was how people recorded what their families looked like before photos.
Exactly. It was a highly specialized, very lucrative skill to physically document reality.
So when the daguerreotype emerged, it wasn't just some abstract aesthetic debate in a salon.
No, it was an economic catastrophe for those artisans. Their livelihoods were evaporating overnight.
Consequently, the critical establishment, which was aligned with those painters, viciously attacked the camera's artistic legitimacy.
They had to devalue the output to protect the old medium.
They argued that because a machine captured the image through chemical automation, it bypassed human craftsmanship completely.
It was viewed as cold, mechanical, and totally devoid of soul.
Devoid of soul. Where have we heard that recently?
Right. It's the exact same phrasing.
There's this quote in the report from the poet Charles Baudelaire. He famously called photography the refuge of every would-be painter, every painter too ill-endowed or too lazy to complete his studies.
That word lazy is doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
It really stands out. It loops right back to what you were saying about the labor illusion.
It does. The implication is that if you didn't spend a decade grinding pigments and studying anatomy, your photographic portrait was considered a shortcut for the lazy.
But look at how the medium actually evolved. The camera did not destroy human creativity.
Not at all. It liberated it.
How so?
Well, once photography took over the burden of strict documentary realism, painters were suddenly freed. They didn't have to just paint exactly what was in front of them anymore.
So they could explore abstraction.
Exactly. Abstraction, pure emotion, impressionism. The camera pushed painting into entirely new territories.
And furthermore, we eventually recognized as a society that a photographer is not merely pushing a button.
Right. It's not just point and shoot if you're making art.
The camera is a tool for capturing light, sure, but the human dictates the framing, the composition.
The emotional context, the lighting, the subject matter.
The legitimacy of the art form shifted from the physical execution, like painting the strokes, to the human intention driving the lens.
And that transition from dismissing the execution to valuing the intention brings us perfectly into the 20th century.
Right, specifically the backlash against electronic instruments.
Yes, if the camera threatened our definition of capturing reality, the synthesizer shattered our definition of generating it.
Because now, the machine wasn't just observing the real world, it was mathematically synthesizing waveforms that did not actually exist in nature.
It was creating new sonic realities. And the labor friction here is perhaps the closest historical analog to what we are seeing with AI today.
Oh, for sure. The musicians hated it.
They were terrified. In 1982, the British Musicians Union actually attempted to ban synthesizers from recording sessions and live television performances.
Wait, an actual institutional ban?
Yes, a formal ban.
That is wild.
The union argued that a single keyboardist using a synthesizer to replicate, say, an entire string section or a brass ensemble was directly taking jobs away from traditional acoustic session musicians.
Which, to be fair, they kind of were.
But beyond the economic argument, there was a profound cultural resistance.
They called it fake.
Constantly, artists using electronic instruments were perpetually accused of making fake music.
Because it wasn't a real instrument.
Right. The prevailing sentiment was that because the sound was generated by an oscillating circuit, rather than a physically vibrating string plucked by a sweating human being, the music was inherently sterile.
It was dismissed as just, pushing buttons.
It was pushing buttons, the ultimate insult.
But then artists like Kraftwerk or Brian Eno and the pioneers of Detroit techno came along.
Visionaries.
And they proved that you could use those machine-generated sounds to create immense, overwhelming emotional resonance.
They built entire sonic landscapes.
Landscapes that conveyed deep melancholy or isolation or just pure euphoria.
And they did it with circuits.
Right. Today, the concept of rejecting a song simply because it features synthesized production is absurd.
It would be laughable. Electronic architecture is the very foundation of modern music.
It's in everything. Pop, hip-hop, even country music uses synths now.
And speaking of hip-hop, we see the exact same cycle with sampling and DJ culture.
Oh, absolutely. Taking us back to the late 1970s in the Bronx.
Right. You have marginalized young people who largely did not have access to expensive acoustic instruments.
Or formal conservatory training.
Exactly. So they repurposed what they had, the turntable.
They isolated the drum breaks from old funk and soul records and just looped them.
Creating a continuous beat to rap over.
And how did the musical establishment respond to that?
They called it theft.
They completely dismissed DJing and sampling as derivative.
They argued that these artists weren't actually composing music at all. They were just playing other people's records.
Which completely misunderstood the mechanics of the new medium.
Entirely. Because these producers were utilizing samplers, like the Akai MPC, to create highly complex sonic collages.
They weren't just stealing, they were chopping, pitching, reversing.
They were taking fragments of historical audio and recontextualizing them into entirely new rhythmic and cultural dialogues.
They turned the sampler into a highly expressive instrument in its own right.
They did. But it took decades of legal and cultural friction. Sampling went from being derided as a total lack of talent to being revered as a sophisticated foundational art form.
And we saw this same skepticism with digital art, too.
Oh, early Photoshop.
Yeah. critics arguing that painting in Photoshop wasn't legitimate because the software had an undo button.
Real painters don't have undo buttons.
Exactly. Or the shift from physical film splicing to digital nonlinear editing software. Like, if you aren't physically cutting the film with a razor blade, are you really editing?
The pattern is incredibly, almost painfully consistent.
It is. The old guard looks at the new interface, sees that it automates a historically difficult physical process, and immediately labels it cheating.
Which forces a very uncomfortable realization for us today. Many of the creative mediums we consider absolutely foundational to our modern cultural identity were initially categorized as fake or lazy by the arbiters of their time.
Wow. That really puts the current AI panic into perspective.
It does. And to ground this concept of technological amplification even further, the report provides this brilliant, detailed case study.
Yes, the Prince case study. I love this part.
It's phenomenal because it looks at Prince, an artist who is universally recognized as an authentic, idiosyncratic musical genius.
No one questions Prince's authenticity.
No one. But when you examine his golden era in the 1980s, you realize his creative output was inextricably linked to emerging, highly complex studio technology.
He wasn't just sitting in a room with an acoustic guitar.
Far from it. Prince is the perfect synthesis of profound human imagination and cutting-edge automation.
Let's break down his workflow, because it shows how tools drastically expanded his cognitive and creative bandwidth.
First, let's talk about multi-track recording.
Right. Before magnetic multi-track tape, recording a song generally required an entire band to play perfectly in a room at the exact same time.
You had to capture the live performance.
But multi-track technology allowed a single individual to record a bass line, rewind the tape, and then record a guitar part over it.
It isolated the layers of production. It meant you didn't need the band.
And then there is his use of the drum machine, specifically the Lin LM1.
A legendary piece of gear.
He didn't just turn it on and let it keep a metronomic beat like a toy. He engineered the machine.
He fundamentally altered it.
He ran the outputs of the drum machine through heavy guitar distortion pedals. He physically opened the back of the machine to detune the EEPROM chips,
creating those iconic, unnatural, knocking snare sounds that defined his era.
Right. He didn't use the machine to replace a drummer. He used it to invent a rhythmic texture that a human drummer could not physically execute.
Furthermore, he utilized polyphonic synthesizers, like the Oberheim, to construct orchestral scale arrangements entirely by himself.
So the technology enabled Prince to function simultaneously as the composer, the arranger, the producer, the performer, and the audio engineer.
All at once. The technology did not generate Prince's ideas.
Obviously not.
It provided the necessary scaffolding to capture the sheer velocity and breadth of his internal thought process.
Because his mind was moving so fast.
Exactly. Without those specific tools, the volume and the complexity of his infamous vault of music would have been physically impossible to realize.
And this is the thing. We listen to a track like When Doves Cry, right?
A masterpiece.
Which is famously driven by a stark programmed drum machine loop and a synthesizer.
It's entirely electronic.
But we never say the drum machine wrote that song. We inherently understand that the machine was a vehicle for Prince's intention.
Of course.
So the question the report implicitly asks is, why can we intuitively accept that a programmable drum machine is a conduit for a human's emotional intent? But we completely reject the idea that navigating a latent space with an AI model can also be a conduit for human intent.
I think part of the answer is that the drum machine's mechanics are now understood and demystified. We can see the buttons.
But AI is invisible.
Right. AI currently operates as a black box for the general public. It feels like magic.
And magic is scary.
Magic is inherently threatening because it bypasses our understanding of cause and effect. We can't see the gears turning, so we assume the machine is doing the thinking.
That makes total sense. But, the Prince analogy also highlights a much darker historical reality. Prince had access.
Incredible access.
He had the financial backing of a major record label to afford early multi-track studios and incredibly expensive drum machines.
That gear costs tens of thousands of dollars back then.
Exactly. He had the environment and the capital to actualize his imagination.
Which transitions us into what I found to be the most sobering, most emotional section of the report.
Yeah, this part really hit me.
It introduces the concept of the hidden graveyard.
The hidden graveyard, what does that mean?
The hidden graveyard represents the unquantifiable, staggering volume of human creativity that never materialized into public awareness.
Because the barriers were too high.
Precisely. Because the socioeconomic or physical barriers to entry were insurmountable for those individuals. It is the silent tragedy of historical expression.
It is so sad to think about. We are talking about the sheer statistical probability that some of the greatest symphonies ever conceived were imagined by people who were, legally barred from owning property or attending a conservatory.
Imagine the music that died with them.
Or were mourning the brilliant novels written by candlelight by someone working 14-hour shifts in a textile mill who simply couldn't afford the paper or the postage to reach a publisher in London.
Their brilliance was trapped by their circumstance.
Right. Throughout human history, possessing a brilliant idea has only been a fraction of the requirement for creative realization.
Creative ability has never guaranteed creative output. The report categorizes these historical bottlenecks beautifully. You have economic barriers, which dictate who can afford the raw materials of creation.
The paint, the studio time, the cameras.
Then you have geographic isolation, dictating access to institutions or distribution networks. If you weren't in Paris or New York or London...
Good luck getting anyone to see your work.
Exactly. And physical barriers.
Yeah, imagine having the complex architectural vision of a master painter in your mind, but lacking the fine motor control to hold a brush due to a physical disability.
The vision is there, perfectly formed, but the physical interface of the body cannot execute it.
And most pervasively, social marginalization.
Right. If you belong to the wrong class, the wrong gender, or the wrong race, the institutional gatekeepers simply would not finance or distribute your imagination.
Your ideas died in your head. Or, best case scenario, in a private journal that got thrown away.
And this is exactly where the title of the report, Rescuing Imagination, carries such massive emotional weight.
Because over the last century, we have watched technology slowly erode these barriers.
Right. Home recording software allowed teenagers to bypass million-dollar studio fees in the 2000s.
Desktop publishing allowed independent writers to bypass legacy publishing houses.
But AI represents a quantum leap in this barrier-lowering trajectory.
It acts as an absolute equalizer for execution.
It really does. Consider a person with severe physical limitation. They can now utilize voice-to-text models combined with generative image models to direct and construct expansive, beautiful visual narratives.
Without needing to physically manipulate a mouse or a stylus.
Exactly. Or consider someone with severe social anxiety who could never network at a gallery, or someone who never had the financial privilege to attend an expensive art school.
They can now rapidly prototype their conceptual ideas, organize their thoughts, and visually communicate their internal worlds to everyone else. It bridges the massive chasm between a human's cognitive capacity to imagine and their physical or financial capacity to actually execute.
It gives them a voice.
If we view these models through this specific lens, not as evil corporate content generators, but as life votes for trapped ideas.
It forces us to entirely reevaluate the human dynamic at play here.
It really does.
But to do that accurately, we must dispel the most pervasive technical misconception in the current public discourse.
Which is?
The idea of autonomous generation.
Right. There's this prevailing belief that AI models just operate in a vacuum.
That a human just blindly presses a button marked "make art" and the machine decides what to say, how to say it, what it means.
Let's explain how this actually functions, technically and creatively. Because an AI is not an autonomous, creative entity. It just isn't.
No. It is an incredibly complex probabilistic map.
A map of relationship.
Precisely. Let's look at generative image models, for example. They operate on a technology called diffusion, mapping concepts into this high-dimensional mathematical structure known as latent space.
Latent space.
Right. And here's the crucial thing. The model itself has no desire to create.
It doesn't wake up wanting to paint a sunrise?
Not at all.
Yeah.
It has no aesthetic preferences, it has no political opinions, and it has absolutely zero emotional states.
It's just math.
It is an inert repository of mathematical relationships. It just sits there until provoked.
So how does the human actually operate within that space? Because it's not just pushing a button.
Navigating a billion-dimensional latent space requires highly precise linguistic constraints.
The prompt.
Right. Think of navigating an AI model like a film director working with an incredibly versatile but entirely memoryless improv troupe.
I love this analogy from the report.
It's brilliant. The troupe, which is the AI, has read every script ever written. They can instantly mimic any genre. They can adjust to any lighting cue. They can wear any costume.
But they have no inherent desire to perform.
None. They just stand on an empty stage staring blankly, waiting for instructions.
So the prompter, the human, is the director.
Yes. You have to provide the motivation, the specific constraints, the emotional target, and the stylistic parameters.
Because if the director merely says, perform a sad scene,
The troupe will execute a statistically average, highly cliché approximation of sadness.
right, someone crying in the rain.
Exactly. And the output will feel entirely hollow because it lacks specific human intent.
It's just an average of all sad scenes.
But if the director specifies the exact nuance of the sorrow, if they curate the performance, stop the troupe, redirect their actions, generate dozens of variations, and meticulously edit the final footage.
Then the resulting film actually reflects the director's specific lived experience.
Yes, even though the director never actually stepped in front of the camera or built the set.
That distinction is the absolute crux of the entire report.
It is the dividing line.
The technology assists with the execution, but the human remains entirely responsible for the meaning.
Meaning is exclusively a human export.
The AI does not know what irony is.
It doesn't.
It does not feel political outrage. It is literally just a predictive engine.
It is the human operator who recognizes the irony in a generated phrase.
Who applies the political outrage to a generated visual.
And who shapes the raw, probabilistic output into a cohesive, impactful, emotional statement.
So the creative labor hasn't disappeared. It has just shifted.
Precisely. It has shifted from the physical execution of the medium to the cognitive curation of the concept.
It is a highly editorial form of creation.
It's like being an art director of your own imagination.
Okay, so if the nature of the labor has shifted from physical execution to cognitive direction, how do we adjust our evaluation framework as an audience?
We have to evolve.
Because we cannot continue relying on the is it real or fake purity test.
No, it's an exhausting, historically bankrupt way to engage with culture.
It just leads to dismissing everything.
The report argues for a maturation of our critical framework. Society must transition away from reflexive, tool-based purity tests and move toward impact-oriented evaluation.
So judging the art by what it actually does to us.
Yes. When we encounter a piece of media, the first question should no longer be, was a machine involved in the execution?
Because the answer is almost always going to be yes in some form.
Exactly. We must ask a more substantive set of questions.
Such as, what should we be asking?
First and foremost, does the work communicate a meaningful idea?
Right.
Regardless of its supply chain, does it articulate something vital about the human condition?
That's the most important thing.
Second, does it provoke genuine reflection or emotion in the viewer?
Does it make you feel something real?
Yes. Third, does it reveal a discernible human intention? Can you sense a human mind utilizing this medium to bridge a gap with your mind?
And we also need to factor in things like discernment and synthesis, right?
Absolutely. Did the creator just accept the first statistically average output, or did they curate, combine, and refine the material to create something uniquely theirs?
Did they actually put cognitive labor into it?
Right. And crucially, we must ask ethical questions regarding transparency.
This is a big one.
It is. Is the creator being honest about their use of these tools, or are they attempting to deceive the audience to capitalize on the labor illusion we talked about earlier?
Right. Claiming they spent 80 hours painting something when they generated it in Midjourney.
Exactly. Evaluating the ethics of the creator is entirely separate from evaluating the legitimacy of the tool itself.
Do you really believe we will successfully make this transition? Like, will we actually reach a point where utilizing an AI model is viewed as boringly normal as using a digital synthesizer or applying a color grade in video editing software?
Historical precedent strongly suggests we will.
You think so?
I do. But the transition requires a generational cycle.
It takes time for the old guard to move on.
Yes. The current gatekeepers, whose professional identities and egos are deeply intertwined with the friction of legacy tools, they will naturally resist.
They will fight it tooth and nail.
But the emerging generation, the kids who are growing up interacting with these statistical models as just a native layer of their technological environment.
They won't have that baggage.
Exactly. They will not care about the physical purity of the execution. They will evaluate the art based solely on its emotional resonance and its conceptual strength.
They will judge the impact, not the interface.
Perfectly stated.
Well, we've covered an immense amount of ground today. We started with the visceral defensive panic that occurs when our mental models of effort and value are disrupted by a new tool.
The psychological whiplash.
Right. And then we mapped that exact anxiety onto the historical resistance against the camera, the synthesizer, and the sampler.
Showing that this panic is a predictable cycle.
And we've arrived at a profoundly different perspective, I think.
I hope so.
That rather than operating as an autonomous replacement for human creativity, these emerging models can function as lifeboats.
Rescuing human imagination from the hidden graveyard of circumstance and limitation.
It is an evolution from fear to a highly complex but highly democratized form of empowerment.
It really is.
But, if you are listening right now, it is entirely valid to hold on to your caution.
Oh, absolutely. Healthy skepticism is required.
You should be deeply vigilant about the economic displacement of artists. That is a real crisis.
We cannot ignore the labor implications.
And you should be acutely aware of how synthetic media can be weaponized to distort reality, especially in politics and news.
The potential for manipulation is massive.
But remember, the tool itself is ethically neutral. It is just an amplifier.
Right.
It will amplify noise and deception just as efficiently as it amplifies profound human connection and beauty.
The moral weight belongs entirely to the human directing the machine.
We must be capable of holding both of these realities simultaneously.
It requires maturity. We must manage the severe socioeconomic disruptions while also acknowledging the unprecedented expansion of creative accessibility.
Because we are entering an era where more people than ever before in the history of our species possess the infrastructural capability to show the world exactly what is inside their heads.
It is a beautiful, terrifying frontier, and the KiCKFLiP numbers report concludes with a philosophical framing that I think perfectly distills this exact moment in time. It notes that every major expansion of technological capability, from the printing press to the synthesizer to the neural network, has ultimately altered the mechanics of how imagination materializes into reality.
As we conclude this deep dive, we want to leave you with one central thought.
A good question to carry forward.
The next time you encounter a piece of work that challenges your definition of effort,
Or the next time you find yourself hesitating to use a new tool to express your own ideas.
stop, take a breath, and ask yourself,
Did the tool replace human thought entirely, or did it help human thought finally become visible?
Thanks for listening to KiCKFLiP Radio.
I feel blessed to be here in this place, but to fully say what I feel right now